This is The Changelog, and I'm your host, Adam Stacoviak. We're a member-supported blog and podcast that covers what's fresh and new in open source. Tune in live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern at thechangelog.com/live. And this is episode 0.8.7, recorded April 30th, 2013. We're joined today by Chad Whitacre, the creator of Gittip, also known as Gittip. If you found this show on iTunes, we're also on the web at thechangelog.com. And if you're on Twitter, follow The Changelog, because that is us. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody. This is The Changelog. It is no, it's not Thursday. It's Tuesday. I'm so used to saying it's Thursday, but it's not, because it's Tuesday. We take the show live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Got an awesome show lined up today. If you have not heard, the podcast is back. This is the third one going out. If you're waiting for 0.8.6, it's coming soon. I'm sorry about that. It's just taking a little bit longer than normal. But we do have some fun guests with us. We got my ever-popular, always fresh, always new, Andrew Thorp.
How's it going, Adam?
How is it going? And we got Kenneth Reitz here. What's going on, Kenneth?
Not a whole lot. How you doing?
I'm fantastic, man. It's such a good day.
Today is a good day.
Such a good day.
It's a little overcast here, unfortunately.
Where's here? Because, you never know where you're at.
In the hills in Virginia. Next week, if I'm on the show, I'll be in Amsterdam, though. It'd be pretty cool. I'm going to try to do it. We'll see.
We'll have to get you on the satellite for that one.
Yeah, the new rig you just had commissioned, right?
Yeah.
With all the T-shirt money.
Well, what the thing is we were promoting, open.nasa.gov, and so they gave us a satellite. It's pretty sweet.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's just like that. And speaking of satellites, we got the Gittip extraordinaire with us, Chad Whitacre. What's up, bud?
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me on the show.
So we're here today to talk about sustaining open source. Can you help us talk about that, Chad?
Oh, my heavens. Not quite yet.
Before we actually officially get started, maybe a quick introduction of who you are.
Absolutely. All right, so Chad Whitacre is my name. Gittip is my game. Gittip.com is a website which primarily right now is being used by open source developers and the companies that love them. And it's a crowdfunding site where you can go and you can set up $1 a week or $3 a week or 25 cents a week as a gift to someone whose work you love and admire and are inspired by. So it's ongoing, sustainable crowdfunding. Every week, every Thursday, we pull money into the system, we shuffle it around in the system, and we push money out into people's bank accounts. So they can buy beer and, pay a bill or something. Or whatever they want. It's gift money is what it is.
Gift money. So before we go too deeply into the show, just for the listeners' sake who are out there thinking it's Gittip, how do you say it?
Well, it depends. I say Gittip, and that's a change. I used to say Gittip, and a lot of people still do say Gittip, and if you want to be old school, you can keep saying Gittip. I say Gittip because the vision for this thing is to take it beyond the tech community and the open source world, and to get musicians on there, to get bloggers on there, to get artists on there, people that have no clue what GitHub is, for example,
or Git,
or Git, right? And in my experience so far, folks like that, when they see the word, they say Gittip. That's the first thing that comes out of their mouth. So I'm sort of trying to skate ahead of the puck on that one and get myself used to saying Gittip, because I think in the long run that's how it's going to end up.
And do you say puck because you're a Penguins fan, or what?
Uh-oh. Yes, let's go with yes on that one.
All right. Do you miss Lemieux or what?
Wow. Don't we all? I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you a big hockey fan?
Absolutely, man. I'm from Pittsburgh, man. I love the Penguins, man.
Yeah.
100%.
Right on.
I'm not a big hockey fan, but
did that get mentioned on the air yet? So I'm here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
We were talking about that, yeah.
We definitely aren't worried about saying where Chad is from, because he's very personal in his Twitter profile. His location.
Yeah. I mean, Right, that's a thing.
Can you explain?
Well, so I was on this Reddit thread like a year ago. I had this thing where I was like, I'm going to friend everybody on Facebook, right? I was like, I'm going to try and friend like all, 750 billion people or whatever it was at the time that were on Facebook. So I started this thing, and, some folks on Reddit got interested in it, and so we started trying to friend each other. Long story short, this one guy on the thread was like, I look forward to being friended by you, in 5 years or whatever when you get to me. And I essentially doxed him, right? Like, I took his handle on Reddit and found out, like where he was graduating from high school in 2 weeks kind of thing, And it kind of freaked me out, and that was sort of a wake-up call for me about digital privacy, right? And how there is none. And that was the point, I ended up, like, backing away from doxing this kid and, like, deleted my comment or whatever. But I was like, well, what have I got to lose? You can find it all out anyway, Might as well just live out in the open. So, it's part of the whole openness shtick, but that was the event that precipitated it. It's like, I'm going to try this, see what happens.
So now in your bio you have your address and your phone number, right?
Exactly. So my Twitter bio, what does it say? I'm going to go click to it. But yeah, it says, yes, it has my address, my phone number.
Does it really?
Yeah, it
my
says
email address.
Founder of Gittip.com. Call me at, I'm not going to say it. Email me at, I'm
Call
also
me
not
at
going to say it.
412-925-4220. Email me at chad@zadaweb.com. And what do I say? Visit me at 716 Park Road, 1503.
Wow. And so what does your wife say about this?
It almost came up the other night.
Does she not know?
No, she kind of knows, I think. She's not a super online kind of... She uses Facebook some. She's got a Chromebook, like, 2 weeks ago, and so now she can actually get on the internet. Before that, she had this, like, old laptop that barely worked. I don't know. Yeah,
I'm not
she's less open about... she's less gung-ho about it than I am, but, that's... she knows who she married.
I'm not going to say one way or the other about it, but and not to sound awful, but when all that stuff was going on with the PyCon stuff, and that was one of the major reasons why, like, I started to almost feel like whatever semblance of digital privacy I can achieve, like, this is the reason why I would want it, is to prevent this from happening. And that stuff, shoot, we don't need to talk about that because I don't want to shed light on it, but that's something that, like, I don't know. In a world today, it's something that people have different opinions on, and you're rightfully so entitled to it.
It's a brave new world, right? I sort of have this idea, like, at some point there will be a scandal, right? I'll be like dragged into scandal, and somebody will be like, from one side or another, it'll be like Chad did this or Chad did this, and I don't know. I'm hoping by getting into the habit now of being open that it'll make it easier when it's tough. That's not true just in the case of scandal, but just in general. It's like, you gotta start early when it doesn't hurt quite so much if you want to, have big things that are also open. I don't know. Yeah, that's where it's coming from.
So transparency is a really big part of what you're trying to do. Do you want to talk about open companies at all?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, so open companies. So I'm trying to run Gittip as openly as possible.
Well, before you do that, let's talk about what Gittip is, just so everyone kind of knows before we kind of get into the crux of it. So why don't you give like a, just the short and dirty of what Gittip actually is.
Man, it would be great. Okay, so it's nice to do this with some screenshots, right? Like, so if you go to gittip.com, and you look at the homepage, you're going to see, right now you see a list of the top receivers and the top givers and the top and new participants, right? People that have just joined the site. And you click through to one of those and you see a profile. So everybody, you get a profile page on Gittip, right? You sign up for Gittip, you get a profile, and you have this opportunity to sort of you make a statement. In the database it's called your statement. That's the column. Your statement, I am making the world better by ... fill in the blank. Okay? So the idea is that we've got these, these industries, open source software, the software industry being almost chief among them, where you've got all these people giving their work away for free, right? That's like the heart and soul of open source, right? Is you're doing it for the love. And so Gittip is a way to give back. So you go to somebody's profile page and you see, I'm Mike Bayer and I, write the SQL Alchemy library, which is a really popular SQL library for Python, and, I do this other stuff too, right? And then you have an opportunity there to click a button $1, $3, $6, up to $24 or 25 cents is the minimum. So it's a small gift. You can't give them $100 a week. You can't give them $500 a week. You can give them up to $24 a week. You set up that gift. The idea is you're going to set up these gifts to a bunch of different people, and that's gonna tick over every week. And then you're both a giver and a receiver on the site, right? So as soon as you've signed in to give to somebody else, you're also open to receiving gifts on the site. So the idea is kind of to build a social network, right, where there's this, you're linking people according to the relationships they've already got, but there's money on the line, right? Try to take it to the next level here, and see if we can stir some stuff up with it. So that's the basic mechanism: is you go to somebody's profile, you read their profile, you set up a gift to them, and that gift is recurring, so it's every week. Right now we don't actually support one-time gifts at all. It's a big feature request, and we're talking about it. We'll get to it someday. Requests? One-time gifts, so I want to give you $20 and then walk away, right? That's not the essence of Gittip. The essence of Gittip is weekly, recurring. Because
you're trying. I mean, this is the play. Kenneth, I know you mentioned talking about the openness of it, which is so unique to the way you're trying to build it, but. Yeah. The sustaining part is, I know that there's a lot of talk out there about just, I know you said, I didn't know you were taking this beyond open source either, but that was news to me. But I know that sustaining is a big topic, at least over the last couple of years, really. But because people get burned out and just, there's lots of this, a lot of conversation around that.
How long have we had, donate buttons on open source projects, PayPal buttons on open source projects? Pledgy, we've had these mechanisms, but what I'm seeing is that one-time gifts aren't enough,
right?
Because on the one hand, my bills are recurring, my bills aren't one-time, rent isn't a one-time thing, and then on the other hand, awesomeness isn't a one-time thing, as my friend Bruce Adams said, you don't stop being awesome tomorrow, Gittip is built on this idea that you're really buying into someone's story, and what, you're inspired by the work that they do, and you want to support them. Do you guys know about the MacArthur Genius Grants?
Mm-hmm.
Is that on your radar?
I'm not familiar with it. No.
Yeah. So the MacArthur Foundation is this big nonprofit philanthropic foundation, and they give out these grants, and I think it's like 30 or 40 people a year get these. It's $500,000, no strings attached, and it pays out over like 5 years, right? So it's basically like a solid salary for 5 years, no strings attached, no questions asked. And they call it the Genius Grant, right? Because the idea is you're such a genius that whatever we told you to do with this money would just be dumber than what you would come up with, right? Because you're the genius, So we're just going to give you this money just to see what you're going to do with it, right? Because you've already proven yourself, you've done all this awesome stuff in your field, and it's across all different fields, right? So you've done all this awesome stuff. We're going to give you this money just because we know you're going to do something awesome with it. And so that's one way to think about Gittip, right? Is it's sort of crowdsourced genius grants. So very much sustainable. We want people to be set free to pursue their passion, right? And work work on what they love.
And so why did you decide to build it, as Kenneth mentioned earlier, in this open open way that you're doing it? Why
well, it's the only way to do it. I mean, first of all, just because that's a part of my personality, right? I mean, hanging it all out there on Twitter like we were talking about, that's the way I want to live. It's the future I want to live in. I want to live in a future where we've got transparent, open institutions. That's one of the things I love about open source, the best of open source, you can go and you just find out how it's made. If I want to find out, so I'm coming from the Python world, and I'm starting to make connections in a lot of the communities, but Python's sort of my scene. So if I want to find out how Python's made, I can just go on the issue tracker. I can get involved in the mailing list. And that level of transparency and openness, I think is just a really good thing for humanity. I think it's just something I want to see more of. I look at all this stuff over the past few years with the financial industry, right? And people are crying out for openness and transparency in government and in corporations. And so this is sort of Gittip is me planting a seed and saying, can we get to a stage where our big entities, like our big organizations and the ways that we organize ourselves, are done in this transparent way? It's trying to apply the insights of open source software, of the open source world, to wider domains, to paraphrase Eric Raymond at a certain point. So I don't know, man. I mean, it was the only way I could think about doing it, you know? I mean, why would you not? Why would you, like, you know, to push it back? Like, why do something closed anymore? It's no fun.
I guess sometimes the reason why people choose, well, I guess not sometimes, most people choose to do closed things is at some level in their humanity a fear of failure, right? You'd rather fail silently than, you know, in a room full of people. And so I think I definitely applaud you.
Have you failed silently?
No, I mean, yeah, sure, yeah. I've had some silent failures before. I'm cunning.
You're cunning.
Yeah, you know, I'm sneaky.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're right. Like, you put your name out there. You put something out there. It's a risk, right?
I'm kind of with Andrew on it though. Like, I don't want to be private, but there's a level of me that I want to keep personal. There's that, like, I think of it like this. Like, I have lots of friends on the internet, just like most of the people on this show and those that are listening. You know, you got lots of internet friends and internet pals that are really good friends, but, you know, those who are really close to you know who you are in your heart. It's a little different than your internet personality potentially, you know? So I think I'll hold that a little sacred to my heart. Yeah. And we're just different though.
No, I mean, yes, people are different and people have different comfort levels, and the last thing I want to do is force anybody, you know, into, you know, a situation they're not interested in. You know, so another key part of the way I'm running this, it's voluntary, right? That's another part of open source culture. Like, you're not forced to work on something you don't want to work on, right? It's open source, it's free, you know, the personal autonomy is prized. Yeah, you know, so obviously there's stuff that I don't share, you know, mostly at my wife's behest. You know, yeah. So there's some, right. I mean, all right. So to get back to maybe to get back to the open company idea, the way I define an open company is it shares as much as possible, it charges as little as possible. Number 2, and number 3, it doesn't pay its employees. So I mentioned
that's
that.
a tough one. That last one there. You said that one a little quiet too.
Did I?
Were you scared?
It doesn't pay its employees.
It doesn't pay its employees, but we're hiring.
But we're hiring, exactly. Right. Well, I mention it because, you know, we share as much as possible, but we don't share everything, right? Like, you don't have, I hope, the password to our database, right?
Right.
You know, you don't have our secret API keys, right? You know, so we share as much as possible, but not everything, right?
If you want to sit on like the board meetings, those happen in public, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I had a company come to me today in private email, and they were like, "Chad, can we do this, you know, promotional deal together? Can we do this cross-marketing promotional thing? You know, and by the way, we respect the open company thing, but we need, you know, we want to do this privately, right? We want to plan this privately, and then we'll come out with a bang together." And I said, "Sorry, you know, I can't do it. You know, I can maybe try and work with you, but anything I'm going to do for this has to be done public." I just feel like I don't have the right to make any decisions privately because the Gittip community has entrusted so much to me, you know? And I take that very seriously, or I try to.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think the way that you have it on your frequently asked questions page is that you and only one other person have access to the sensitive data. So and I think that makes sense. Obviously, you can't make other people's information public when they've, you know, when it's sensitive for them. Because, like you said, you can't make the decision what other people want to share. So
exactly.
So if the company were to come to you and say, you know, we want to work with you, but we have sensitive data that, like, we want to give you access to, but you can't share it. I mean, you have to take that into consideration, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
So would you tend to just, like, I see you know, you tweeted about it a little bit and you kind of turned the offer down a little bit, but if it was something like that where it was more just, hey, like, you can't share our internals, like the plan of what we do together can be public, but you know what we share with you privately you can't share, and you're okay with that. So.
Yeah, so that wasn't the case with the company I just mentioned, but let me bring out on the show right now balanced payments. Are you guys familiar with balanced?
Just from you tweeting about it all day, because you've been pretty excited about it.
Oh, especially today, man. I love the way this lined up. So Balanced Payments is the payment provider underlying Gittip, and they're a really close partner of mine. I went through 2 other payment providers in about a month when Gittip first started, and was kind of left high and dry. So I was with one that got acquired by Groupon, and they disappeared off the face of the earth. Then I went to Stripe, which is gorgeous, right? I mean, Stripe's top-notch product, but I was violating their terms of service, and they're not really designed for marketplaces. I mean, they're sort of bolting on some marketplace features, but, you know, the Gittip is weird enough that we didn't fit within the feature set that they had available. So they asked me to leave politely. I'm very professional about it. You know, so a month into Gittip, you know, it's going great guns. We're getting, you know, some Hacker News traction and all this stuff and some growth. You know, first thing in a decade that I've tried that's growing, and all of a sudden, you know, the bottom falls out again. 2 payment providers are gone. Balance Payments comes along, and, you know, it was at an interesting point in their own development where they were pretty hungry, and they came along and they said, Chad, how about we submit a pull request to your repo to integrate with our service? Right? So this was
nice.
I said, thank you. Yes, please, right? You know, so they showed up. One. And they did, man. They submitted this pull request to integrate with their service, you know, and the next week we were running unbalanced. You know, we did the PCI compliant transfer from Stripe over to Balanced, and we're off and running, and I've never looked back. You know, so now I have a really close partnership with those folks, and it's been great. So I mentioned in this context because last November, I don't know if it was on your guys' radar, but we had this bout of fraud. These folks showed up on Gittip and they plugged in stolen credit cards and started dumping stolen money into Gittip, which was interesting. But that was sort of, it was a bit of a test of our relationship, Balanced and I, you know, because anti-fraud is very, very closed, you know, as a rule. Traditionally, you know, any information you leak is aiding, you know, the enemy, right, the fraudsters, and giving them, a potential upper hand in the constant battle. So that was something we had to work out together, you know. And I ended up on a phone call with, their risk officer and their lawyer, who I'd met before that. You know, we were on friendly terms, but we got into this call, and it was a little bit tense. It was like, so I'm trying to do this openly, right? So I was dealing with this fraud incident very openly, and I was blogging about it, and I was tweeting about it, and I put out a whole page on our website, on the Gittip website, detailing who I was flagging as fraudulent, you know, and who the money was coming from and going to, right? Very detailed information. Wasn't hiding anything. So we had this call that was like, all right, so where's the boundary line? You know, like, you guys have to let me know when I cross that line of your comfort, you know, when you feel, you know, because we've got to have that boundary established, right, where you feel comfortable, and I'm able to, you know, to do what I need to do in terms of openness. And we worked through it, you know. But you're right, man. When another company has needs like that, where they're like, you know, we've got our own policies in place, you know, obviously, yeah, I have to respect that.
Yeah, so I want to circle back real quick. When Stack was talking about, I think a lot of people go closed because of fear of failure. You know, that may be or may not be, I'm not sure. But I think that we kind of hit on it a little bit. I want to kind of go into it a little deeper. But the beauty of open source, and not necessarily open company, because I think there's a lot more to that. I think we can get into a lot more to that. But the beauty of open source and how we're trying to hit on this right now is, if you fail, there always is failure. It's always an option, whether you're an open source project, a closed project, it doesn't matter. But the beauty is, like, if you can get over your own personal fears and you can make your code available to the public, the majority of this community wants to help and does not want you to fail. So if there's an idea and people can get behind it, then they want to help move that forward. And so obviously Gittip is, you know, an open source project. So have you experienced that firsthand with people more encouraged to help rather than to watch it fail publicly? Oh yeah, I mean, you know, as I indicated a little bit ago, I mean, this is my first rodeo. I've been trying for over a decade to get something off the ground and doing different open source projects and different business ideas. You know, and this is the first one that's really gotten any traction. You know, which is super awesome, and it's great. You know, that's what gets me up in the morning. You know, like I lie in bed in the morning, and then I'm like, oh crap, what are they saying on Twitter? You know, like, or oh, that's right, there was that person I wanted to respond to, or there's that pull request I needed to get to. You know, and that's very motivating for me. The input of the whole community around it. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm
maybe after a decade, I'm comfortable enough with failure or something. I don't
Can we
know.
pause there for a second then? So this is becoming successful, and I'm trying to figure out maybe exactly what is your commercial play, not so much like you getting rich, but at least
Like,
making money.
How do you
make
define
money?
success?
How much money do you make? How much money do you make? What are some of the metrics there since you're so open?
How much money do I make? Well, on Gittip, I think I made $266 last week, and I gave away 88. So so what's the net's 180 there? So I'm making $150 to $200 a week on Gittip right now. So call that $600 to $800 a month on Gittip. And where do you want to go? Do you want to?
Well,
you're
how about
still
the company itself? Like, how does you said you don't have any? I mean, I gotta imagine you have costs and stuff like that. I'm sure those are being met, but
yes.
Do you keep money in the bank? Are you a corporation, LLC?
I am. Absolutely. So there's Gittip LLC. Gittip LLC is a legal entity that's owning all this, right? And it has a bank account, and we charge. So point 2 of the open company definition is charge as little as possible, but you still charge something, right? That's the idea. So when you move money into Gittip or you pull money out of Gittip, I do charge a fee. Gittip charges a fee, and that fee is designed to be as low as possible. It's designed to barely cover, it's designed to cover your operating expenses and not wages and profit, essentially. Okay, so that's designed to cover credit card fees and hosting costs and other services, as well as some cash reserves, right? So there is a fee involved, but it's designed to be as little as possible.
So if you put $1 in, how much is the fee? Is it like 5 cents?
Well, okay, so if you put $1 in, then I'm going to charge you $10, and you're going to pay 68 cents in fee, and $9.32 is going to be in your account, and that's going to tick down over 9 weeks. Your dollar gift is going to go, 9 times till you're down to 32 cents, and then at that point, it's going to charge you another $10. So we charge you a minimum. The least we charge is $10 to minimize credit card fees. If that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a business, right? It's a business, with a plan, and it's got fees in there to cover the cost because the last thing that Gittip is about is desperation, and if I had to come to you all and be like, look guys, I need to pay my hosting bill and I just need like $100, please. Could I just have like $100 to pay my hosting bill? Like that's not, how does that help anybody? That's not what it's about, right? So we've got the fees in place to cover the things that we ourselves are charged for. And then beyond that, Gittip is funded on Gittip. So I personally am on the site, and the understanding is that anybody who's going to be working on the site is also going to be on the site. I'm not, that's, point 3, don't pay your employees, so I'm not, I don't have any salaries to offer you, I met with some people the other day. It was interesting. It was another even more fraught meeting. These, a couple really top-notch marketing folks, actually, who, I'd met in person here in Pittsburgh. They were interested in Gittip and interested in getting involved. I'm trying to figure out how to get marketers into the picture, because we've got collaborative development figured out for developers, right? So how do we bring, how do we take that beyond just developers? And, we reach this point where they're like, well, so like, what are you offering me? Like you're saying you don't have equity, you're saying you don't have salaries. And I reached a point where it's like, look, bring your own carrot, BYOC. I have no carrot for you. Like if you're going to be working on Gittip, it's going to be because you want to be here, because that's why I'm here, and that's the open source way, like, at the best of it, it's, you do the changelog because you want to do the changelog,
Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, definitely. I think we struggled over, or I struggled over the term labor of love. I was trying to remember what it was
last episode.
in our first episode back, but that's the truth. Like, we can kind of empathize with you on that. Like, we do this because this is something we love to do, not like what I said at the time, and it still rings true. Not because we're going to become millionaires off the changelog. This is something that what we want to do is we want to shine a light on people like you that are doing neat things like this. And so, awesome. You said that you're not going to pay salaries, and then you kind of talked about the fees. But so those fees, they're not going to scale well. Like the more traffic that you get, not traffic in terms of like visitors, but the more money that goes through the system, the more money that's going to get charged and essentially deposited in the LLC's bank account. So you might not be claiming a profit. So what do you do once you start to actually have more money than your expenses?
Yeah, so we have a ticket. We'll keep track of it. I actually need to do a better job of making that information actually public, because it's not fully public right now. My what's the word? The people I look up to here are WATSI.org. Are you guys familiar with WATSI?
No.
WATSI, WATSI.org. They are crowdsourced. You guys will actually really like this. They crowdsource third world medical treatments, right? So you can go and you can see stories of kids all over the world, and $500 would make their turn their life from really sucky to awesome, right?
Oh, and it's for specific children.
Exactly. Yeah. So WATSI.org. Is another crowdfunding platform where they do this stuff, and they are really awesome in regards to open finances. Okay, they publish. I got to dig it up for you. I tweeted about it a while ago. If I can't, I'm going to get distracted if I go digging for it now. But I'll get it after the show. They publish a Google Doc, which has all their finances unaudited. So they're basically crowdsourcing the auditing of their finances, and they get people coming back. They're a nonprofit, and they get people coming back to them being like, is this line item right? And they're like, no, it's not. So talk about failing publicly, right? And they're doing this, right? So I sort of look up to them as an exemplar of open finances. There's some others, right? Patio 11 does this too, right? He publishes a lot of financial data. So there's definitely people that I have stuff to learn from there. I'm expecting Gittip eventually to be a nonprofit. I haven't started filing that paperwork yet. If anybody wants to work on that, let me know. Because somebody raised the point, even though I'm not making a lot of money off of it, there is still obviously value in the company. And as long as it's a for-profit company, there's always a sort of shadow hanging over, like, well, what if Chad turned around and sold the company, right? And sold out, and it went down the tubes. So we do need to address some of those things just to shore it up, and make sure it's protected.
You want to reduce your buzz factor.
Yes, reduce even further. Is that Andrew, the kind of thing you were talking about, Andrew? Am I answering your question?
I was going to actually clarify that. I think, Andrew, were you talking about because it's an LLC and at the end of the year that money falls back on, because I'm assuming you're a single member LLC?
Correct.
Okay, so that money at the end of the year, when 2013 closes, that's going to fall into your personal, your personal tax. And then, so at some point, you're going to have to pull whatever profit, in air quotes, profit is out there in Gittip, whether it's, realized or not, and you're going to pay tax on it.
Well, and I'm just saying there's lots of different ways you can kind of, shuffle it around and do different things. But I guess my point is, so there will come a point in time where it's not about like, okay, let's say this year, the end of the year comes and you realize, hey, like we made a profit. So now you have to figure out what to do with that money. That's fine. That's scenario A. But then you can look at it and say, okay, like now I have actual data I can project, and next year my operating costs, I can be more accurate with it. So how do you then prevent that from happening again? Like, are you going to look in the interest of, or look at, maybe reducing your fees, or cutting your fees off at a certain point, or things like that. Like, what's the big goal for that?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to charge as little as possible. That's point 2, right? So we'll review periodically, and we'll say, well, our fees are too high. I mean, because honestly, they are a little high right now. It's 3.9% plus 30 cents. I just picked that out of the air to get something going. Balance charges me 2.9% plus 25 cents for credit card transactions. which is pretty standard pricing. And it's what I believe it's what Stripe does as well. For sort of the first tier stuff. And once we get enough volume and we can do some volume discounts and whatever, we're going to pass that along. Absolutely. So we'll bring those down. It's not, eventually, the awesome thing would be to fully automate that, so we can, we can compute each week what the fee is going to be that week based on projections.
Now, I feel like the goal of an open company should be to have probably as few assets as possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird stuff, like I just sponsored a conference here in Pittsburgh, the Steel City Ruby Conference. I was at an event last night. Nice. Was talking to some folks, and it was like $300 to sponsor this conference. And they're good friends of mine, and they've done a lot to help me, promote Gittip here around Pittsburgh. So I really wanted to be part of this, and was talking to this friend of mine. I was like, "Yeah, I want to sponsor this." So I just paid for that out of personal. Because I don't feel right putting that through Gittip. But I mean, this is gray area stuff that's going to need to get worked out. I don't feel like it's my bottleneck right now, and sort of. But at the same time, like I don't want to be, I'm not looking to set Gittip up to, for a surprise, right? I mean, that's the risk, right? Is that here's a big one for you. Even if you want to talk about risks and legalities, like the idea of an open company not paying its employees, well, how about minimum wage tax, right? Or how about minimum wages, excuse me, right? How about, the tax issue is huge. You're getting money for, you're getting money through this. When you've got
hundreds of people and you don't know who they are, you can't.
Yeah, how do you decide what's a gift and what's not? So I actually did talk to a lawyer about this, and she gave me this awesome 2-page footnoted memorandum. Digging back into case history on this, and it's really squirrely. It's like the way gift tax works in the U.S. It's just not clear cut at all, right? So, in some ways, Kickstarter is obviously the gorilla that's sort of blazing the trail here. So they're going through a lot of this right now, right? And it's just all it's a gray area of the law. Crowdsourcing is new, crowdfunding is new. It's new in the past few years, it's new in the past few years. So, Gittip's a little fish in a big pond at this point, and, we're keeping an eye on.
Well, if you think about it in those terms of
like
gifts, though, maybe I'm a guy that likes to use metaphors to understand things, so maybe the audience can just bear with me for a moment. If not, I'll just be quiet. But I kind of think of it maybe in this terms as if I'm a really, really cool, popular open source person that is awesome, to use your words from earlier. And I'm on the proverbial digital street corner saying, I write awesome code, give me a couple bucks. Mm-hmm. That's essentially what Gittip is, but it's not begging, it's just an opportunity to accept a gift from somebody else. Is that essentially the metaphor you use then?
Yeah, more or less.
Well, it almost seems like that kind of flipped on its head. Whereas traditional, financial, pay for things is pay for service. Like I'm going to do a service for you, and this is what you're going to pay me. It's like the opposite of that, where like you're not doing these services for pay. You're doing these services because you want to do them, and you're not even necessarily expecting someone to pay you on Gittip. It just gives me, the consumer of the service, the opportunity to say you deserve something.
Okay, so in the law, though, it's much more about intentions than it is about how the parties frame it, it turns out. And this is all, okay, so I am not a lawyer, and Gittip is not in the business of providing legal advice formally, right?
Yet.
Yet. Well, the lawyer I talked to advised me not to, Gittip is not in the business of providing legal advice. But it gets really gray, So, like, if Read the Docs has a Read the Docs account on there, right? And people are giving to the Read the Docs account, and for anybody who doesn't know, so readthedocs.org is a documentation hosting website, right? Mm-hmm. And they're one of the top receivers on Gittip. They get $100, $120 a week. So, they're getting $500 a month on Gittip, and clearly people are giving to Read the Docs so that Read the Docs keeps going. You know what I mean? Like, it's for that project, right? So the people on the other end of that, they're getting the money for that. What's the what's the status? Is that employment for a job that they've done? Keeping Read the Docs online? Is it it's the line for it to be a pure gift for income tax purposes is it's a pretty high bar. Switching metaphors there. I don't know.
So it's all about expectation and context.
Yeah, I mean, when you go and you look at the case law, it's like, so these two business associates in Detroit in the 60s, one, they both had two companies and they, gave each other all these backroom deals, and the one gave a Cadillac to the other, right? And so the one that gave the Cadillac wrote it off on his taxes, and the other who received the Cadillac didn't report it as income because he considered it a gift, right? And, the auditor or whatever, the solicitor came around and said, where's this Cadillac this guy wrote off? Well, it was a gift. And, what they decided is you had to go in and you had to look at the specifics of each case and decide, was this given out of a quote-unquote disinterested generosity? Okay? It has to be a disinterested generosity, right? So it's a really high bar. A, it's a really high bar, and B, it's a really messy line because it's not, it's not clear-cut. Like, for them to actually sort this out, what the courts do is they set up a tribunal, right? They set up a trier of fact, and they go and they look at the facts of the case, and they judge for themselves, right? Like, was this pure disinterested charity gift, or was did this have some sort of motive? And here's the thing. So, here's the thing. I see Gittip as interested generosity. But then I don't, but who am I to say, there's hundreds of people giving to read the docs. Like, who am I to say what their motives are? And so that's where it gets messy. Is like, how are you going to try the facts? How are you going to really dig into those hundreds or potentially thousands of people that are giving to you and decide, well, this percentage was disinterested and this percentage was actually interested because of this library. And then how are you going to decide? Like, so Mike Bayer's got 5 different open source projects. Which one was I giving to him for? I don't know. It's a huge thing, right? So I don't know. Like, it
seems like it does get pretty messy.
It does,
On
and
that
I'm trying not to be
messiness,
chicken little about it. I mean, I'm trying, and I'm also trying not to be, naive about it.
Yeah.
So, just trying to forge ahead, and we'll, like I said, I did talk to a lawyer this year, and as we continue to grow, I'm gonna, keep on top of that stuff.
Well, I certainly appreciate the transparency on that. I think I guess as a follow up to that conversation there on the openness of it then. So when the year does close, and let's say I made more than $600 from Gittip, whether it's considered a gift or not a gift as by law, however you find that out, is it up to the receiver then to file that, or do you provide paperwork? Is this something you have to eventually absorb as, a liability and a cost?
Yeah, so 3 things here. So first of all, it's your responsibility. Chad Whitacre personally, I reported my income I received on Gittip last year on my taxes I did it online. It wasn't even other income. I did report it. I found a line item to report it on, so I did report it. It is your responsibility. It's the person's responsibility, and that's in the terms of service, and that's what's on the site. 2, what was 2, gang? We're talking about taxes. Okay, so 2 is balanced. Okay, 2 is...
Like, where's he going?
Yeah.
Come
2
back.
is... there are reporting requirements that Balanced is responsible for. So if you receive over 200 different transactions or over $20,000, Balanced is obligated to give you a 1099-K. So that's, you have your bank account information stored with Balanced. They have your info. They have your identity. So they're going to provide you a tax document in the case that you're over that volume.
So does 1 month count as one transaction?
That would be each week.
For each week, sorry.
Yeah. The payout is also thresholded. So if you only have $5 in your account, we don't pay out. So it could be every other week or whatever, right? But yes, so if you had, so you would only have 52 payouts at most in a year. So you wouldn't cross the 200 threshold, but you could conceivably in the future cross the 200, the 20,000 threshold. So Balance will provide you a 1099-K in that case. 3, when we get to, all right, so there's some features we're working on to deal in different levels of abstraction. Okay, so right now Gittip is most clearly individual to individual. And this is something we get to. We're starting to get companies Roku involved. Sorry.
Nice.
And others. So there's companies that are starting to get involved. There's projects like Read the Docs are starting to get involved. Gittip itself, of course, is an open company that's on there. And then there's just open source communities in general that we want to deal in. So these different ways of grouping people, right, that we need to deal into Gittip somehow. And some of those ways are going to involve tax implications, right? So I'm expecting that the people, for example, that receive money through the Gittip account. So there's a Gittip account on Gittip. Right now it's getting like $9.50 a week. And what we're experimenting with, just in the past couple of weeks we started this, is splitting that money up publicly in sort of through some sort of voting mechanism, right? So basically the idea is like this $9.50 a week represents the wages and profit of Gittip, right? So the operating costs, the fees are taken care of in the fees that we charge. And then the $9.50 a week going to Gittip is for the people, right? And so we split that 28 different ways, I think, in the past couple of weeks. And I expect as we grow that feature that's going to include, a tax document component, right? Where you're going to, in order to receive money from this pool, right? When there's $100,000 going through that or whatever, or $10,000 a week or whatever it's going to end up being, right? That in order to receive money from that, you're going to have to sign an additional terms of service that says, I am a contractor of Gittip and I'm going to get a 1099 at the end of the year. And so Gittip would start to get into the business of providing tax documents for that kind of situation. So, this is all tricky stuff, right? And we're starting to consult with lawyers and get feedback from people on this and try and be smart about it, so we don't get flipped down the road. So we're kind of, I don't know. Am I answering that question at all? It's
well, no. I think it's a tough. I don't think it's really answering it. I think it's just talking about it because I don't think there's really an answer to your situation as it is now. I think
untrodden territory.
Yeah, I think Andrew's got something funny to ask you, but in a second or two. But I think that's kind of part of coming on this show and talking about, not just Gittip, but sustaining open source and how you're exposing yourself as the founder of this, and then potentially the people that get involved in it. What's their exposure level? What's the risk level? I think, and it's kind of neat. It's a cool discussion to have, and I think it's certainly cool that you're doing it, but I don't think there's really an answer.
There's so much gray area too.
Stuff though, man. I didn't come on here to talk about friggin' taxes. How did this happen?
Well, no, but I think that it's a good point, and that is like you're doing something that maybe has never been done, but it's definitely not the norm. So, if you look at like how companies operate, how like if you're going to start a company, you can kind of look at the model. Like this is the way that you start a company. This is the way you close in on your Series A funding. This is the way that you do X, Y, and Z.
Well, this is
and
how
for
you franchise a McDonald's in the the limit case. Like it's all in the book, right? Yeah.
Right. And so for you, there's nothing like that. Like these are
manual.
Yeah, and these are huge questions. These are questions that they're not easily answered. These are questions that you could easily answer it incorrectly, and it could cost a lot. These are questions that, and so I think that it's interesting because this is where the open idea, and you can get so much community input. Like, who's to say that a very respected, corporate accountant doesn't get wind of this and say, I want to get involved in this, or some really good lawyers don't get behind this and say, oh, this is cool. Like, I want to get involved in this. And then you have, who knows, you have pro bono law, you know what I mean? So,
and it's so serendipitous, like I never know what's going to happen. And then somebody shows up, like the fraud thing. I got, a dozen private emails from fraud specialists, anti-fraud professionals, who are like, Chad, let's Skype, I want to help you out with this. That's awesome. It's fantastic. Or I'm like, oh crap, the second payment provider just dropped out from under me. And then Balance comes along, Dude, I have to give a shout out before we slip past this. Balanced, I just learned today, so Mateen Tamizi, the CEO of Balanced, I'm watching them because they're on board with the open company idea, and I'm watching how that develops for them, right? Because they're a payment provider, right? Which is traditionally very closed. And, they keep saying, we really believe in this openness thing, and we're trying to move our business in that direction. I just read the thing I was tweeting about today. Mateen had a blog post in Fast Company where he's talking specifically about what it means for his business when he says it's an open company. What I learned in there that was really awesome is that they've open sourced their dashboard. Okay, so the new dashboard for Balance, like version 2 dashboard that they're working on right now, is being developed in the open on GitHub, which just blows my mind that, like, you know, imagine any service that you use, right? And like you're using this service and you're like, all right, this dashboard's pretty good, but you know, this is just annoying. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like anybody who's a web developer, especially if you're a front end dev, like when you have those experiences, right? Like when you're using a product and you're like, man, why doesn't somebody fix this? You know what I mean? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
And
I
then,
mean, like a little bug with a browser, or
exactly,
it could even be a way to get a job too. So
yeah, exactly, right. And so this is a case where now, when you see that, like there's no excuse for you not to just go and clone the thing, fix the bug, submit a pull request, and it's fixed. You know, and then like you said, exactly, that's exposure for you. It's reputation for you. It's good for Balance. It's good for all Balance customers. That blew me away when I found that out today, because that to me is just like it's a watershed. It's going the extra mile with openness. I'm humbled by how much they're doing openly.
It's funny because you bring up something. Yeah, you bring up something that. So like, there's this thing called usability, and then there's the UX stuff, and they're kind of the same thing, but like there's some differences, right? So.
Okay.
It's an interesting topic because if like 150,000 people get used to the way this feature works, even though it's not working the way it should, and then a person comes and fixes that on let's say they fix it, submit a pull request, and it gets merged in and deployed to production. So now all of the people that have become accustomed to the feature as it was, okay, Facebook releases a redesign and everyone complains, like, if they don't go back to the old version, I'm quitting. And then Facebook will release their white papers that show actually, like, our usage spikes tremendously when we receive these, when we update these, even from you. And so, like, it's funny because now the companies are going to have to answer for that. So the bigger Gittip gets, somebody submits a pull request. Everyone got used to whatever. Somebody submits a pull request to fix a bug, and now that feature doesn't work the same way. So how do you respond to that as the company?
So the company has to answer for it, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is, here's a link to the GitHub thread where we talked about it openly and publicly, right? Like, you could have participated, and you can next time, and now you're educated.
Kind of like saying the reason your town is gone is because we posted it downtown that you're going to get your home excavated.
Exactly.
You should have moved.
This is how it works. Yes. So I can only see that as positive. That's. I mean, it's transparency. This gives a play. Like, yes, all of us, when Facebook changes something, what do? We grouse on Facebook because we feel powerless, right? It feels like there's us and there's, them, right? And the them is the people inside Facebook that get to make all the decisions, this cloudy conspiracy, right? Like, humans are so prone to conspiracy theories, right? And we see it, or I don't know, I guess all right, so I have a tendency to see it. It's like the stuff that happens behind closed doors. And here we're just throwing it wide open,
I think it's extremely important when you're doing this to have a BDFL in the projects as well, because if you just did everything that all your users wanted to do, it would collapse within minutes, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole new kind of leadership that's needed for this kind of project, in this kind of product, in this kind of.
That's a good point right there. I like that. I'm glad you said that, because you're right. I think it takes a different. Not a skewed perspective, but definitely a different perspective, because like we said earlier, at least I said this earlier, people, they operate closed companies out of fear of failing or acting a fool or being a fool in front of a bunch of people.
Right?
Yeah, or competitors. There's the fear is the basic component
Signus
of the
NDA.
concern.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh my gosh.
My idea
the number of people that have asked me to sign an NDA in a coffee shop, that's, come on, guys. Give me a break.
Yeah.
Have they asked you to do that as you were representing Gittip?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Like, here I'm running. Yeah. For me to tell you my idea. Yeah, but
so you call it an open company, and I think that when in what we do, and specifically because the code is open source, like obviously we can kind of mix those two things up. But, just listening to you talk, like knowing a little bit about you, and it sounds almost like the idea of an open company, or your vision for an open company, almost embraces like the minimalism thing more so than even necessarily like the open source thing, because it's like to the lean minimal, like use as little as you need to keep going. And if you do that, you can prevent the big bloated company that is very inefficient, that is very greedy, or whatever you want to say. So, I mean, can you speak to that? Like, is there any minimalist influence in this open company?
Yeah, I mean, I love minimalism. I guess I haven't made that connection consciously before, but it certainly could be there. Trying to learn the lessons of companies like GitHub, right, that do run a distributed team. Obviously open source projects have run distributed teams for decades, and free software projects. And companies are starting to pick up on this now too, right? Like, we don't all have to be sitting in the same place to get stuff done. We can get by with less. But I mean, you're right. With Gittip, it's even more. What goes on the corporate credit card and what goes on Chad's credit card. More goes on Chad's credit card than goes on the corporate credit card. So
it's easy. Yeah, I mean, it's the open idea, and then it's the transparent idea. It's that everyone knows. So it almost helps to keep it accountable too. And you're definitely, like, we kind of keep going back to it, but you're definitely bucking the mold when it comes to this stuff. And I'm excited.
Fun, man. Like, I'm having fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. Great. I mean, just because where Gittip is right now, like, there's no reason to think it's going to be the same place in 2 months. And it's so refreshing, because you can look at even companies that you do admire and respect, like the GitHubs of the world. Yeah. Like Fab today, they had a huge pivot, and that never happens. Like, companies never pivot like that when they've established themselves. So it's cool to see like that Gittip is going to be this thing that I don't even know if you'll ever call it a pivot, because you're going to be forever like this fluid company that's changing and shifting the way that you do things, and it's based on community feedback. So, success or failure, like, it's just going to be a really fun thing to watch no matter what.
Chad Whitacre will be the new Eric Ries.
Yeah.
The open startup. So do you feel like the definition for an open company is super strict? Like, do you think there could be a form of it where a company does pay its employees?
Yeah, I mean, so Balanced is taking on board the terminology open company. Okay. And of course, they're doing it very differently than I am, and that's, I'm fine with that. They're allowed, I don't have a trademark on the term open company.
So you're not being Richard Stallman about it?
No, nope, not doing that. No, I mean, I love it. It's a huge win and a huge validation for Balance to be taking this on board and to own the term, and to own it and to give it their own meaning. That's great. I love it.
I think the really great takeaway with your relationship with them and what you're trying to do is just all about consistency, really, because you have your address up on your Twitter account. Yeah. And you're all about open companies, and Gittip is an open company, and then they're doing the same thing. It seems like I don't know. It's very, very consistent.
Super fun. I don't know. Okay, so now I want to talk about Heroku. 2 weeks ago, starting to give on Gittip.
Yes.
Because it was awesome, and thank you, Kenneth. Are we public with this, Kenneth, that you were behind that? Can I say that now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So thank you, man. It's awesome.
Absolutely. I'm really excited.
What I want to, the thing I want to mention, and you and I talked about this, I want this to be public as well, is that it worked because it inspired generosity, right? So the story is that Kenneth brought Heroku on board with Gittip to start investing in open source through Gittip, and you put Heroku on the top of the Givers leaderboard, right?
Correct.
2 weeks ago, was it?
And then as a tremendous validation of what happened, the goal was to try to lead the way so other companies would start doing the same. And because companies don't really contribute back to open source in that way often. So Max CDN now is the number 2 giver. Yeah, which is perfect. And ideally, I want people to be fighting for that number 1 spot, right?
Yeah.
And having 10, 15 companies do it, I think it would change everything.
I know I've spoken privately to 2 other companies that are in the works with this, and I think we're only going to see more. But I want to say it worked in that the week that Heroku started giving on Gittip was the biggest. Okay, so you did that on a Friday, and it runs every Thursday. So the next Thursday, you did it Friday night after we'd already run that day, or Thursday night, because I was about to go to bed, and then I sat down and I went on Gittip.com and I saw Heroku up there. I was like, what? Santa's up for a couple more hours. So that whole next week, we got the biggest bump by percentage of givers that we'd gotten since month 2. I mean, since last summer. So it was like givers total went up 12%, in the wake of Heroku joining and setting that example.
That's amazing. And ideally that as more companies get involved, that number will continue to grow, and it'll be like
absolutely.
I can't remember the term. It'll be like the cruft of the hockey stick, basically.
The cruft? Is that what you called it?
I don't know.
I'm in. The cruft
right.
of the hockey stick.
Sure, why not?
Yes. Yeah.
Up and to the right.
So,
we'll get there.
Kenneth, since you pioneered Heroku supporting Gittip, and not so much just Gittip, but those that are on Gittip that need support, so if there's someone out there listening to the changelog, whether it's live or the podcast, what do other companies like Heroku, not exactly like Heroku, like your technology, but that care about open source, that use open source, pretty much lots of companies, right? But what should they know about Gittip that Heroku knows that could make them do the same?
Well, I mean, I feel like it should be any company, really, because I feel like every single company that's doing something meaningful in the world probably has a set of software developers, and they're probably using open source, right, in some way.
Right.
So they should sign up for an account and start just contributing $5 a week to some developers whose code they use. Or as there's more projects that'll start to, there's Read the Docs right now, and there's Gittip, and ideally there'd be like a Django account on Gittip, and they could just contribute to that, and that would be huge. And I think there's plans to have a page on Gittip that'll kind of explain the pitch to a company on why they should do that, right? Yeah, Chad.
Yeah, I wrote. I don't know if you saw it, Kenneth, but there's a ticket in GitHub that has some notes towards that.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll get there.
It's cool because you see, so there are obviously one of the big problems. There are obviously well-known developers, right? There are well-known developers that do get paid a lot of money in their day job, or they do get paid a lot of money to speak at conferences, or well, you know what I'm saying. But there's this notion that only those developers could very easily get noticed. You know what I mean? Like, those are the guys that are out in public that are doing things that you see. So it's easy to say, so someone like Kenneth, you obviously work at Heroku, and you go to conferences, you do other things. So you're one of the top receivers on Gittip, and I think it's cool, and I think this is an opportunity for you to say, okay, I'm just going to be a funnel. Like, people can support me on Gittip, but then you're also one of the top givers. So then you can turn around and give that to other people that you've encountered. And hopefully, I mean, I would love to see that happen, where just because you're receiving money on Gittip, that doesn't mean we need the rich to get richer, or, and I'm not trying to say you're rich or anything, Kenneth, but, just to say you as a model, like, it's cool to almost see you as, like I said, a funnel. Like, money comes into you from Gittip, and then you can disperse it to things that you use, and it can keep going, and it has this effect where it can kind of chain like that. I think that's really cool.
I think it's also really important that if you're receiving money on Gittip, to consider keeping it all, too, because, it needs to leave the system for it to work. Right. And I feel like a really big part of it, ideally, I think every major open source contributor, I feel like in Gittip's goals, basically their long-term goals is they'd all be receiving $2,000 a week, and that would be their salary, and they wouldn't have to work anymore. They could just work on open source all the time. Mm-hmm. So funneling things all the time, I don't think could work, but it depends on the sustainability of your situation and all these other things, right? I don't know. Yeah. Chad, do you have any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I mean, the goal is for people to make a living through Gittip. The goal is for many people to make a living through Gittip, not just the quote-unquote rock stars. That's been a huge subject of conversation in the issue tracker, especially. And we've got some features in the works to work on that. One of them is this project thing that I think I started talking about with how did I phrase it? When I was saying that we're trying to introduce these levels of abstraction, right? Layers of abstraction, so that you've got groups as well as just individuals, right? So we're hoping to implement those in a way that helps the long tail. helps keep our Gini index down. Gini is a measure of inequality that's used a lot, and that is one index that we're starting to track. I lost the train. I lost the
Gini
train.
index.
The rock stars.
Rock stars, right. I want it to work for everybody, right? I want it to work. Okay, here's something I was thinking when we were talking about this. Open source projects is a big part of it. I'm interested, maybe this is a place to introduce this, not just open source projects, but open products, which is an idea that has been floating around in my head, and I think you guys have seen, I'm hoping to get together a blog post for the changelog about this. But sites like Gittip that are primarily a single hosted product, but just happen to be open source, right? As opposed to something like WordPress, for example, which has a hosted version, but is really like an open source project that also has people that will host it for you. Do you catch that distinction? You know what I'm talking about? Like, for example, the balance dashboard, right? Like, this is a great example. It would be what I would call an open product. You're not really, it's not primarily designed for you to go set up your own instance of it, although you could, and, you're not going to be stopped from doing that. But it's really supposed to be like, the balance dashboard, and it happens to be open, right?
I feel like Read the Docs is probably
the
best example of that today.
Say again?
Read the Docs?
Yeah, so Read the Docs. Git Sentry is another one, gitsentry.com, right? Travis CI. We've got these instances of, and again, it's starting as open source itself does, with the developer tools, right? It works for those, for those products because they're developer focused. So I'm really curious how far we can push the limit how far we can push the envelope with consumer-facing products that also happen to be open. I mean, the canonical thing in my mind is just like, what if Twitter were open source? What if Google were open source, right? So I had that experience like we were talking about earlier, where it's like there's a little niggling misfeature or bug on Twitter.com or on Google.com, like Facebook.com, big consumer applications, big consumer products. What if they just happen to be open? That's it. That sort of that what if is sort of the out there in the future that I'm sort of aiming towards, and why I'm so happy about this balanced thing today with their dashboard being open. It's like that's the kind of world I want to live in. I want to live in a world where I feel empowered. I want to live in a world where we have openness, and transparency, and where it's more fluid, where I can go get involved in this project. Because look, man, we're already doing it. I was talking to somebody who was talking to yesterday, that was saying like, for top programmers in the Valley, it's like 4 months is your term of employment is not unusual. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, like 2 years ago it was 2 years, and now it's 4 months. I mean, come on. Like, clearly employment, do we want to use the word broken or what? I mean, clearly employment is shifting and changing, right? What does full-time employment mean when you work for 4 months and then you move on to something else for 6 months? So like, why not? So part of what I'm trying to do here is loosen it up so you can work on something for 4 months, without, and you can ease into it, like you don't have to go through this big hiring process and all this paperwork and everything. Like, you can ease into one and then gradually fade into another project, and somehow, civilization goes on. I don't know. We'll
Push
see
the
how far
envelope
the open products thing goes.
in all directions.
Yeah. Yeah. For better or for worse. I don't know.
In some ways, it's like you're gonna be a pioneer in this area. You can see it, because this is gonna be something that it's just gonna grow, and it's not necessarily just Gittip's gonna grow, but you can just kind of see that the mindset that's behind this is gonna be something that grows. And
somebody's mentioning
really
Reddit
cool
in the chat room too. That's another great one, right? It's open source. You can go run Reddit if you want.
Oh yeah, it's great.
That's actually a great one. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on you, Andy.
I always forget. Everyone always forgets about that.
Changelog needs to be funded on Gittip. We need because it's not just for programmers, because storytellers, right? like you guys that are, surfacing all this great stuff that's going on in the community, like that's a really important role, That's something we need to tie into Gittip more, right? Is like how to tell stories, because developers aren't necessarily good at telling their own stories. So that's another thing. It's another part about getting people who aren't rock stars taken care of, is helping them tell their stories. To be like, look, I spent the past 6 months, deep down in the boiler room of the kernel, and here's, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but you guys are the ones that can bring that out. You know what I mean?
And originally you could sign up with a GitHub account to have a profile on Gittip, and now you can have a Twitter account, right? And that's
right.
To open the door for everybody. Is there any other services like that you're hoping to add?
How about today? I never signed into Facebook. I happened to sign into Facebook today, and an acquaintance of mine had posted, unbeknownst to me, on Facebook, all about Gittip, right? And she was super pumped about Gittip, and she was starting to tell all her friends about it. She's not a developer at all, She's like, I actually met her at Occupy Pittsburgh, believe it or not, right? And, she's super pumped about it, right? So Facebook. So now Gittip's on Facebook, and we've already had a Facebook page. But yeah, I think there's a lot more communities that can really find interesting uses for Gittip, and we want to support them.
Yeah. I think there's so much more that we can go into. I think we're going to have you back for another show. So we're kind of running out of time. So let me ask you, Chad, who is this is kind of the changelog question. Who is your programming hero, somebody that you have looked up to?
Guido Van Rossum. So I've been trying not to say that throughout this show, because I've been trying not to fanboy about Guido and use him as an example, because I knew you were going to ask me this. So how about, all right, so here's a little quirk about that. So at PyCon this year, we, I don't know if you guys have seen pictures online or whatever, but I have this penny puncher. I have a 2-foot hole punch, right? And it puts holes in metal. And I got some custom tooling made for it, so I can put hearts in pennies. Okay? It's the Gittip
Is that legal?
logo. And you're going to have to talk to my lawyer about that. Yeah. Yeah. So I put hearts in pennies, and I had a booth at PyCon, and we had this penny puncher there, right? So it was a huge hit. A bunch of people came by the booth, and we had them punching, we were punching holes in all kinds of different currency, right? It was a whole lot of fun. And I found a penny. I went and I found a penny. It was a 1991 penny, which is the year that Python was first released, okay? And I put a heart in this 1991 penny. And I went out and I found Guido, and I said, Guido, I want to give you this penny. And he said, oh, that's so sweet, but I'm not taking any swag this conference. And I just hung my head in shame, because he had tweeted about it the week before the conference, and I hadn't noticed or whatever. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So every time I try and talk to that dude, I just start drooling or whatever, and just make a fool out of myself. But yeah, I mean, when I started Gittip, I was like, I just want to give Guido money. I just love Python. I love the language, and I love his leadership style. We mentioned it briefly earlier. I just love the way he runs the scene. And yeah, so I look up to him a lot. And maybe someday when we're not at the conference, he'll accept a hard coin from me. But until then, keep plugging away.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
Yeah. So like I said, there's so much more that we're gonna get into. I think it'll be fun to have you back maybe in a few months when we see kind of where this thing goes and the fluid of it, and we'll be talking about, who knows, I mean, we'll be talking about some, fun. Like I live in Nashville now, we'll be talking about some small time, musician that's being funded on Gittip, and it'll be real cool to have that conversation.
Let's can we talk about one more thing before we close, Andrew? So Chad, I know when we had that conversation, I kind of wish part of what we talked about could have been podcasted somehow, but one thing you mentioned, and we talked about it in the show, is that it is open. You don't pay anybody, but you are hiring, and you have a huge stack of issues to go through. So if someone was out there listening right now and they wanted to kind of I want to get into this open company thing, how could they, what is the easiest way besides just saying, hey, go check out the issues and just jump in? Do you have a list of your top ones, or what's the big need right now? Yeah.
So this is the biggest problem I'm trying to crack right now, right, is how to scale the community of developers. I mean, if you're like you're talking about, Andrew, the blueprint, right? I mean, you go get some VC funding and you hire your team and you're off and running, right? So that's not available to me because I don't have any profit to share with venture capitalists. So I can't just go, take salaries out and hire people. So we've gotten a lot of contributions from a lot of great people, which is awesome. What I see, really what I'm trying to do is get that Gittip funding in place, that funding mechanism, so that as you're working on Gittip, there is that incentive where you are going to get a slice of the pie as you stick around and as we grow the whole system. So that's piece number one that I'm working on. Number two is, in the meantime, I'm trying to piece together a lot of things. So there is a page on Gittip right now. On the About page, there is a Get Involved section, which does list a couple different mechanisms for getting involved. It links to the issue tracker. It links to, IRC, free node pound Gittip. And it also links to a newsletter. I have been experimenting with a weekly newsletter that kind of, it's a summary, it's a digest of what's going on from my point of view in the community of people that are actually building Gittip. So right now, that's the best way to get involved, is to go to gittip.com/about, and under Get Involved, sign up for that newsletter. We'll see how that evolves. That's an experiment. This is all an experiment. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping, Kenneth indicated earlier, he tipped our hand, that we're hoping to get some pages out that go into more detail about getting involved. Whether you're a company that wants to start, investing in open source on Gittip, or you're a person that wants to start developing, or you want to give money, or you've got an open source project and you want to receive money, I'm seeing that as a priority, to just explain it for those different audiences in more detail. Here's what the community's like. Here's how to get involved. Jacob Kaplan-Moss gave a great talk at Heroku's Waza conference a couple months ago, and it was about growing a community. It was about lessons learned from growing the Django community, and that's one of the ones that stuck with me. The idea of really documenting your contribution policies and ways to get involved. It sounds like that's something they really focused on. I mean, they have great docs, overall, but in particular, how to get involved. So that's something I'm hoping to work on in the near term with Gittip, so it's easier to do. But for now, check out that newsletter, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Check out the newsletter. So,
yeah,
is it on the homepage, or where at it?
Yeah, you got to go to About. It's on TinyLetter, so it's TinyLetter/Gittip will get you there too.
Oh man, you got to move the campaign monitor right away. You can't be there anymore.
Look, where I want to move is Medium. Have you guys tried Medium?
I just got my invite over the weekend, and I've got two.
They're the first people that have actually cracked WYSIWYG that I've seen. I mean, TinyLetter, WYSIWYG is the Achilles heel of all content web apps, and I love Medium's implementation of it. Yeah. Maybe there'll be an open product someday. I don't know.
Maybe.
We'll get there.
Yep. Well, so I think that we will find a way via the changelog to try and take up the Heroku banner and start to give through Gittip. I think that'll be fun to start to pick people and pick little projects to support, because we use a lot of open source stuff at the changelog.
Well, dude, the big one for you guys, man, you just got to link. You got to link to people's accounts. I mean, PyCoders Weekly, I believe it is, on all they have a weekly Python newsletter, and each bullet point they put a link. They just have a little Gittip icon, and it links out to that person's Gittip account. I mean, those kind of things. The more we can build the network and weave the mat denser. I see that as a great role for you guys.
Yeah, we could definitely start doing that more on when we cover different projects, or and some of the editorial stuff we're working on. We can definitely start doing that more often. It's something we certainly want to do, because we like what you're up to, and we like supporting people, obviously. So
thanks, man. Yeah, we'll talk about it offline.
Cool.
Privately.
All right. Well, privately.
Sorry. Off the call on a GitHub issue. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Again, we do this every Tuesday live at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Specifically, thanks for being on the show. I want to thanks Kenneth and Adam, and I want to thank you for hanging, Chad. It was a good time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
A super fun time. Thanks for having me,
Before
guys.
Chad goes, I want him to say my favorite quote from him.
Uh-oh.
Everybody.
I'm not building Gittip. I'm building a community that's building Gittip. Is that the one, Kenneth?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
That's a good one. I like that.
It's a great one, and it's extremely important.
Yeah.
It definitely pulls back the curtain a bit more.
And when he was making waffles with me the other day, I was at his place, and he said he was making he wasn't making waffles. He was making the community that was making waffles.
We had a good time.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Anybody who wants waffles, 716 Park Road, 15003. Next time in Pittsburgh.
Nice.
All right, you guys.
And again, we are member supported here at the Changelog. You can visit us at thechangelog.com/membership. You can visit us at thechangelog.com/store to buy a shirt. And as Adam likes to say, to hack and style.
Yeah, hack and style with the Changelog team, man, for sure. All day long.
All right, guys. Thanks for being on the show with us.
Very good. Keep real. Okay, thank you, guys.